Hello, and we are back with yet another interview. I'm Bruce Riley with Voters Organized to Educate, and I'm here with my colleague Asia. And we are here today with Aimee McCarron, who is running in District A. For those that don't know, it's Holly Grove and Uptown and up in Lakeview, up that way. So, Aimee, let's just kick it off by having you share a little bit about like who you are, why you're running, and what we can expect from you a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I love the opportunity to get to engage with you all. So I'm Aimee McCarron, and I'm running for City Council District A because, like you, I love our city, and I was born and raised here. Raising my 6-year-old twins here. And I just want to build a better future for our community. I went to Ursuline in NOCA where I studied musical theater, started working in restaurants when I was 16 at Reginelli's in Lakeview, and then worked my way through as a line cook for Ralph Brennan Restaurant Group, and then worked my way up to catering sales manager for Ralph Brennan. After that, I worked as a financial advisor for Prudential. And then I met Joe through, we're both past presidents of Young Leadership Council, started volunteering there with the Power Ties program, and then worked my way up to board chair. When Joe took over as the budget committee chair for the council, he needed somebody to come and help him that had the financial background. So he said, Aimee, would you like to come work with me? I know you have this background and you want to get more engaged and be a civil servant. So I said, absolutely, I will come do that. So I'm the only person that probably knows the budget, maybe even a little bit more than Joe, because I've been behind the scenes, crunching all the numbers and making sure that the council and the council member staff and the other council members have all of the materials they need for those budget hearings, for budget committees, and I'm really pushing that going forward. The next council, nobody has a financial background, and the budget is the biggest tool the council has to hold the administration accountable and to get things done. And so I think that's really important that we have on this next council somebody that has that expertise, and I'm hoping to bring that.
Well, I was definitely pleased to hear that you were a musical theater background, so I think that may be your best tool going forward, perhaps.
Yeah, I know.
As we know, it can be quite a show up there.
Yes, it sure can. It sure can.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Asia, to get us going.
Hi, Aimee.
Hey.
How are you today?
Good.
Thanks. So, development and rising costs are changing neighborhoods like Carrollton, Mid-City, and Holly Grove. What's your plan to balance growth with protecting longtime residents through things like property tax relief, affordable housing, and other anti-displacement tools?
Yeah, so I have said before that I am in favor of not moving forward any new short-term rental, keeping the restrictions as they are, and then building up that enforcement. That's something that I think the city has really struggled with, is enforcing the current rules that we have for short-term rentals. The other thing I think we can do is work with our legislature to increase the age freeze for the property tax, because I think there's a lot of seniors that are kind of missing out because it's of the age that it's currently at. So I think that's one way we can also do that. And as far as affordable housing, Councilmember Giurusso and I funded the part of the Housing Trust Fund with $32 million for gap financing projects. And what we've seen is there's been delays at the state level at the State Bond Commission. So I really want to see what's going on there, work with our Orleans delegation to figure out how we can move some of these projects going forward. And the other thing with that is the city kind of set up their contracting for these things without any time limits. So you have projects that maybe had funding but got delayed at the state level. And then you have other projects that maybe they didn't have to go through the same approval that aren't getting the funding that they need. So we need to figure out how we can move these projects forward at the state level and at the city level, and making sure that we're giving everybody the opportunity to get these projects done.
Okay.
Well, and building off the short-term rental issue, you mentioned enforcement. A lot of people are talking about enforcement, but they're all short on details.
Yeah.
And you've worked with budgets, obviously. What would that enforcement mechanism look like in terms of, let's say, either staffing or funding, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's definitely from a staffing standpoint. We do have a short-term rental fund that the nightly fees that people pay goes towards that fund. And there's $14 million in that fund. And that can be and should be used for enforcement. there are just not enough people in the enforcement office and in safety and permits in general, and honestly, like citywide. I can talk about that all, as well, because workforce development for city workforce is a big piece of my platform. But going back to that short-term rental office, we have the money there to increase funding for hiring people to do this work. And so we've got to make sure that whoever the next director is has been given that told, like, we need to bulk this up by the council and the administration, and saying this is important to people. We've got to enforce these rules, because if we don't have enforcement, then what's the point of having it at all? So we have $14 million, and that's growing because all of those nightly fees that people, when they rent out their short-term rental, they have to pay it. And I think honestly we can raise that fee as well if we need more money to keep that going. So there is definite opportunity and funding already available that isn't even touching the general fund. So,
and that pot is dedicated to enforcement?
It's dedicated to enforcement.
And yet it's maybe just collecting dust?
It's being spent a little bit, but there just aren't enough people to do it. But yeah, it's got plenty of money to have a full crew, and that was the whole purpose of the council setting up that fund. It's called the Interim Short-Term Rental Fund. So if you ever want to get very nerdy and in the details, every month when the city council has their budget committee meeting, there is a packet of finances that the administration presents us. And at the very back of the packet, it's like 90 pages. Well, maybe not 90, but it's like 60, 70 pages. But that's what I read and prepared. And it's got a list of all the funds, and that one is in there. So you can look at it and you can see how much is being spent over the course of the year. And that's one of the funds in there, Interim Short-Term Rental Fund.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Many crises end up in jail or the ER because care isn't available in the community. You supported mobile crisis units and mental health collaboratives. How will you expand those efforts so people can access treatment before reaching a crisis point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to continue the work that the mobile crisis unit has done, and Jenna Vegno and Jeannie Donovan, I know, are two key players in that in the health department. And we need to spend what we can to keep that going and to build upon it. So I would base it off of telling us what the data says, how much more, if Jen says, like, I need, 150,000 more, 250,000, whatever it is, because that will increase the number of people that I can hire to do this, increase the marketing and letting people know. I think the one thing maybe we haven't done a good job of is letting businesses around neighborhoods understand, like, hey, if you see somebody having mental crisis, here's the number that you can call instead of 911. I think there needs to be a lot more push around public awareness around this, because the more people know about it, I mean, even like from a staff standpoint, I knew about it because I was writing the legislation to fund it. But not everybody, even at City Hall or City Council, knows about this. So if we can have more awareness about this program, that way people their first reaction is not to call NOPD. It's to call the crisis unit to get people help, because that is what we really need in the community. We don't want people that are in crisis to go sit in our jail. They need the care that they need, and it needs to be handled that way. So yeah, I would fund it as much as we need, and also just really get down to public awareness around it. Have every bar, every restaurant, every business needs to be aware of what the tools are and the resources are.
Well, let's talk about public safety. As we know, people sometimes, I don't know that anyone likes to call the cops, right? But it's an instinct to call the cops. We've all been conditioned, 911, etc. But so in Lakeview, people, at least publicly, we hear about break-ins, we hear about car handles, and those of us that go to the State House a lot, we understand a lot of what Representative Hilferty and others say about this neighborhood. And then meanwhile, there is gun violence in other neighborhoods like Holly Grove, and we know that there's a similar to the 911 conditioning. There's a habit of building up the police, building up the jails as the one solution. But considering they take up so much of the budget, which you're aware of, clearly just adding to that may just be redundancies. Like, what other ways can we be spending money to create public safety other than adding to the police and jail situation?
Yeah, I mean, this has come up obviously across the campaign trail, and my message has always been that I don't think we need to expand the NOPD's budget at this point. I feel like we're at a point where we've seen crime has been reduced, and I really truly believe that's because we've been doing the both and. We have given the NOPD resources that they need to do their jobs, but we've also funded the violence interruptions. I know interrupters like Ubuntu and just those programs that are really working in the community for this violence prevention. And I think the NOPD can use the resources they currently have, and we have seen it where, the officers that we do have are able to focus on emergencies that they need to handle because we've invested in stuff like on-scene services where you don't have the officers that are normally, responding to traffic accidents. So on-scene services goes ahead and they will respond to a traffic accident without an injury. So that has allowed NOPD to use their current resources as they need to. So stuff like that and civilianization that the council really pushed forward to have more civilians taking care of some of that back end paperwork or taking police reports over the phone, so that way commissioned officers are not having to do that. I just think we have done a good job of giving everyone resources. I think we can build upon some of our violence prevention strategies that we know has worked over the last 3 years. That's been a big part of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that the council gave to certain programs. So anything that we know is working, we should be focusing and expanding funding on that as we can because we have seen results from it. We have seen over time that it helps reduce crime and makes people in all neighborhoods feel safe.
Just one follow-up, as you're aware, I think from your time on the working with the council, working with Joe Giarrusso, we were very adamant against this expansion of the jail and the phase 3. And we know that the city kind of magically came up with tens of millions of dollars to come up with this over $100 million project, which of course is going to require additional staffing, including mental health providers and guards. But we also know that there's this sort of not wanting to pay for it-ism that's going around, particularly around the jail. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when that jail finally, the bills are finally paid, but then the new bills come due?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be really interesting on how we staff it. I know it's been a problem to even find staffing for the current jail that we have. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do that. I don't know what that looks like yet because I don't know when it's opening and how that transition is going to look. But we've got to make sure that we are working with the sheriff's office directly, and they've got to be held accountable for the money that we're giving them. They get a lot of money from the city, and they're not in our financial system, which I know has been something that's been talked about for quite some time. And neither are some of our other partners in the criminal justice area. The district attorney, he needs to be on there as well. So we've got to have some financial accountability and transparency around it because if we are going, it's going to have to be staffed to some level, because we've got to keep people safe that are inside the jail, and we'll have to figure out what that looks like when it comes forward. I mean,
Okay. You've supported creating more youth job slots, expanding after-school activities. If elected, what specific new program would you push in your first year so kids across District 8 have something safe and positive to do? Not just in the summer, but all year round.
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing, I don't know if I put this in my questionnaire or not, but one budgeting thing that I would do with NORD is right now NORD is responsible for the maintenance of their parks and their facilities. That we need to take that off of NORD's hands. We need to put that in Parks and Parkways so we can better utilize the funding to just focus on programming. And what I would do is I would make sure that every kid in every neighborhood had a seat at the table, something that I would convene to ask them, what do you want to see? Because not every kid plays sports. I know my kids don't play sports. They like other things. My son, he's 6 years old. He likes to play video games. There's lots of kids like that, and I don't know that there's programs like that in every single NORD facility. And I think if that's what kids want to do, then we need to make sure that we're asking them what they want to see in their NORD programming, and eliminating that maintenance responsibility from NORD and putting it on someone else will give whoever the next director of NORD is a good ability to just focus on that programming. So, my number one thing would be, let's change that, and then let's have meetings with the kids in the neighborhoods, every single neighborhood. Tell me what you want to do after school. Tell me what you want to do on the weekends, and we'll get that done. And I think I hope that, and I'll ask the next person that is appointed as the director of NORD, are you going to be willing to sit down with me and the kids in the neighborhood to ask them what they want to do? And that's going to be a big question for me. If that person wants to be approved as the director, then I need to make sure that they're going to work with me and the kids in the neighborhood to talk about it.
That actually aligns with one of our basic thinkings around whether it be reentry or rehabilitation. If you want to really know how to do it, you got to at least take the input of the people that are going through it. And if you want to know about the moon, you got to ask an astronaut. So let's talk about second chances and people that are either getting sentenced to probation and dealing with the the albatross of a criminal record sort of the day after they get sentenced, or sentenced to prison and maybe getting out on parole years later, and or some other level of thing hanging over their head. People are struggling to find both jobs and housing because it's a very legalized discrimination.
Right.
What would you do or champion or be part of in terms of second chances for people and trying to get people integrated back into the community?
Yeah, so I know the First 72 Plus is a great program and great. I know they have a whole system that they're working with, and I would love to see how the city can partner with them on helping people. And a big part of what I talk about as far as the city standpoint is building a city workforce to provide basic services, for example, and opportunities. The city only has one electrician that works for the city, so we have to have, one.
Now it all makes sense.
Right, exactly. So we have to outsource. Yeah, we have to outsource. So we spend a lot of extra money on outsourcing that job, that responsibility, when Jefferson Parish has a whole crew. So we need to focus on how can we help and partner with First 72 Plus as well on workforce development for city workforce. I know Councilmember Thomas recently passed that legislation, and the whole council passed that legislation on removing that. If you were previously convicted, that it's not something that plays into going forward into a job. So I think that's really important that went through. I believe that has to be is a charter amendment too.
Yeah, so there's the ordinance, and then there's the charter amendment. We all want people to vote yes on. We assume it's going to be one because I think it's the only one.
Yeah,
but vote yes on second chances.
Yeah, so I think that's important, and that needs to be done because if we don't, then it leaves that hanging out there that people don't have the second chance, and that's the only way that they do have a second chance is if they have a job, if they have stable housing, and if they have help. So, I'm willing to partner with that and push that forward too. But yeah, city workforce development for city workforce, I think, is where we can have some opportunity there too. Because not only are we providing better services for people, but we're providing jobs.
Great, thank you.
Okay. District A still struggles with flooding during heavy rains, and hotter summers make life harder for seniors and working families. What specific resilience measure would you champion, like green drainage in Mid-City, backup power for Pump Station 6, or community cooling centers to protect vulnerable neighborhoods?
Yeah, so we've got to do all of those things. So first of all, we have to get that power. The council funded the substation. It's supposed to be turned on this month. We have yet to see it. It was supposed to be on in July, but then Sewage and Water Board said that it's like halfway there. So we've got to make sure that we are holding Sewage and Water Board responsible and accountable to get that done. Because once they have their own power source, we shouldn't have that problem of, hey, are the pumps on? You know, are the pumps working? So that's number one. We've got to do that. There were 3 drainage studies for District A. One of them was in Mid-City, and that'll help the Holly Grove area too, and then 2 in Lakeview that Councilmember Giurusso done. And actually, there are plans and suggested plans for those. The funding for that is supposed to be in the bond proposition that will be on the ballot in November. So we've got to actually make sure that passes so we can fund it, because that will help with some of the plans are some green infrastructure, and I think they're doing, look, I'm not an engineer when it comes down to like that part, but I think it's going to do, have some water retention stuff in some of the parks. So that'll be a huge improvement for major parts of District A. The other thing is our infrastructure surrounding like green infrastructure. So our cooling centers, for example, Together New Orleans has the lighthouses, community lighthouses. So that's something the council funded, and I think we need to expand upon that to make sure that every neighborhood has one of these solar and battery powered centers. So when power does go out, they can come and charge their phones. They can get a cool something to drink or eat, and then protect net metering, which is another thing. I know it's kind of a nerdy topic, but it's for our solar where you can be expanded, and more community-based solar programs needs to go forward, so that way we have a more resilient power grid. So those are just a couple things that I think I would champion, and really that drainage stuff needs to get done. One last thing, I think, this year, Sewage and Water Board took over all of the drainage, so all the catch basins are now under the responsibility of Sewage and Water Board, and they are funded by the council. We really need to make sure that they're held accountable for what they say they're going to get done as far as cleaning those out. The other part of that is, we see time and time again, and I know in the Pigeon Town neighborhood where their streets have been torn up so much recently by Sewage and Water Board, and all that trash and all that sand is going back down to the catch basins, and it's not supposed to be. But because we don't have anybody watching and being on site and going to these construction sites to make sure that these contractors are not putting stuff down the drain, all the work that Sewage and Water Board does do to clean out those drains is just immediately being filled back up with all this construction trash. So we've got to make sure that whatever contracts we have going forward with construction, that not only is it in the contract that they have got to provide protection on that and making sure that they are not putting stuff down those drains, but we've got to have somebody from the city that is responsible for going out to these street projects and making sure that the contractors are doing what they say they're going to do. They've got to be held accountable for these contracts, and that's a huge part of it, because it's a waste of money if we are giving Sewage and Water Board money to clean out these catch basins for them to be immediately clogged back up because construction workers are not putting the stuff away. So those are a couple different things that we need to focus on.
Okay.
You kind of answered 2 questions in one, because we definitely wanted to get into like holding contractors enforceable, and how do you just keep getting another contract? I mean, you got twins, you see, it's like, how are you going to keep getting dessert if you haven't finished your dinner?
Yes.
So
my son loves dessert.
Yeah.
He would eat dessert he would go on hunger strike and just eat chocolate if he could do it.
I think maybe more people on the council should act like parents sometimes than business dealings. But but I want to go into another aspect of infrastructure that we're seeing in this city, which would be the surveillance infrastructure.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's been an ordinance that has been pushed back, I want to say about 5 times.
Yeah.
So it looks like to the general public that the city council members, 1, 2, or more of them, are afraid to be on the record in an election season about how they feel about surveillance.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. What is your take on let's just call it the surveillance state.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you sort of follow technology as it rolls out. Do you think about the future? Do you think about your kids at 30 and what they're going to be saying to you of like, Mom, this was like while you were, either working for or on the city council.
Yeah.
What's your take on that facial recognition technology and other things?
Yeah. I mean, I think, some of it is scary for me, honestly. I don't, personally, I don't have like any cameras at my house. Whether or not people think that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. But we need to make sure that whatever legislation we do pass and whatever we do allow, I think some of it, maybe license plate readers, stuff like that, are helpful at times. But the problem for me is the unknown of the use of AI in this technology. That is a part that really does scare me of an AI looking at this surveillance and determining it's one person when it actually isn't. And I don't, at this point, I don't know how you put guardrails around that. So I'd be very worried about having some of that AI technology for this surveillance to move forward. And I would encourage, if this council does take action on it, that they need to make sure that has some very, very, very tight guardrails if it does move forward, because it does concern me. It concerns me for the use of this technology for ICE to use it, and we've got to make sure that anything that we do have, we know specifically who is allowed to use it, when they're allowed to use it, and why they're using it. And then we've got to make sure that we are holding NOPD and whoever's using it accountable, because we can't have this being used as a tool to search out for people. It could be even a tool for politicians to use against each other. That's another concern. So I don't think that we need to expand anything at this point, and anything that we have moving forward needs really, 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 really tight guardrails. And the AI piece of it is it's concerning to me.
Yeah, and I don't know who saw it coming that President Trump would allow Elon Musk to deputize like whatever 10 random nerds to have access to all of the data within the federal government, on, and whatever it is they did with it, and then whatever it is they're collecting with their Grok or their ChatGPT and other things.
Yeah.
And if someone goes down the rabbit hole of like who owns Palantir, and we know that this government here will follow federal instruction, maybe to our own detriment, and is anything safe once you've created the treasure chest?
Yeah.
It's like it's gonna get unlocked. So in the way, once you consolidate it, you're just allowing someone to sell it or abuse it. And I don't trust this guy and his dad and his wife who are in charge of, Project NOLA. It's not a government entity. It's not beholden to anybody.
Yeah.
And so some people want to make a couple $1 million. I mean, I wouldn't mind a couple $1 million, but some people, have no ethics about it, of how they're going to go about it. So I appreciate your position that how do you create the guardrails, when you really can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Baton Rouge politicians have repeatedly tried to override New Orleans' local policies on policing, immigration, and utilities. How will you stand up for home rule and ensure the needs of District A aren't dictated by the state officials?
Yeah, I mean, I think we obviously have to be good partners with our state and federal officials, but we've got to make sure that we're doing what is best for New Orleans, and that is our job as council members. So that is what I'm going to focus on. I will be good partners. If it's good for the city, then it's good for our citizens. But I'm going to make sure that I'm willing to work with people. But our homeroom charter is protected. Same thing with our unique ability to regulate Entergy and now Delta. I don't want that to be taken away from the city council. I think we are unique in the fact that we have unilateral power, which means that we don't have to have the mayor approve what we do when we regulate those utilities. So we need to protect that and make sure that we're doing what we need to do for District A and the city as a whole. So I will work with people to the extent that we need to work with people, but protecting New Orleans is number one.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in our conversation here. I think just one last question I'd like to get in is, about like we hear a lot of tension between state, federal, and local around sanctuary city. People like that term at times. Many of us just like to say we welcome residents and we love people who work and live and raise kids amongst us, and we're not so worried about their heritage and whatever. What is your take on how the city can be welcoming to people who maybe are tangling with ICE, and maybe they're going to their meetings, maybe they didn't, but how do we become a welcoming city and not one that's living in fear of a masked federal agency?
Yeah, I mean, we need to make sure that our resources, our law enforcement resources, are for doing what we need to do here, that we are not helping or assist. That's not NOPD's job to assist with ICE. So I want to make sure that our resources are not being spent there, because they need to be focusing on other things. And that includes, like, me as a council member. Like, our focus is for welcoming people is to make sure that we are providing better city services for people to live here, so they like to live here, and that they feel safe here. So I want to make sure that our resources are not being used for any of that. And I think so far it seems like we're doing okay with that, and we don't have all the resources we need locally, so we don't need to be expending them on something else that is not, it's a federal issue.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I mean, so is there something that we didn't chat about that you'd love to share with people, or like some final words you'd like to get in to our folks?
Yeah, I mean, look, I just want to say that, throughout my life, I have been in many different things. I've been in restaurants, I've been in finance, and then public service. And I have never felt the way I feel now with any job, that I can feel it in my bones that this is where I am meant to be, to help people, to help the city of New Orleans, and to make sure it's a welcoming and a place that survives, and that we aren't just, sitting here like doing what we've always done. We need to move the city forward, and I just know that this, in my heart, that this is like, I have to do this. It's a calling to me. It's not something I just woke up and said, I think I'm going to run for city council today. I thought about this, and it's a hard choice. It's definitely a sacrifice for my family. It's hard to be away from my kids and my husband, but they are so supportive because they know that they want a better New Orleans too, and that we both want, our kids and your kids and all the kids in our community to have that choice to live here when they're old enough. And so now is such a pivotal moment in New Orleans that we elect the right people that are doing this for the right reasons. And that's really my message. I believe I can do this. I believe I'm the right person to do it. And I'm going to try and work, and I'm going to work really hard for everybody. So.
All right, thanks. Well, Aimee McCarron, running in District A. If people want to get a hold of her, AimeeMcCarron.com.
Yeah.
And we'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All
Appreciate it.
Thanks.